Kitco News special coverage of the Rural Symposium, Natural Resource Investing, is brought to you by G Mining Ventures.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Szafron. Welcome back to Kitco News. We are on location all week from beautiful Boca Raton, Florida, where I must admit the weather is quite warm and there's a little bit of thunderstorms, some good humidity. But of course, we are here at the Rural Symposium covering precious metals, commodities. Of course, we have CEOs from around the world joining us. And speaking from around the world, our first guest today is Kerry Stevenson. Now, she is the Making Money Matters podcast host, also runs a great conference called the Australian Gold Conference at the end of August in Sydney. If you're there, I highly recommend. Kerry, welcome to Kitco.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here, and it's a bit cooler in here.
It's a bit cooler in here, thank goodness, because it is over 100 degrees out there. Speaking of being hot, there was a little bit of a hot seat. We just looked at Rick Rule. He was sitting there talking. Nomi Prinz. We have some great visitors here this week. Talk to me a little bit about the room. Welcome to Florida. What are you feeling? What are you seeing here from the investor standpoint?
Well, I guess it's early days. I have been talking to a few of the investors here, and to me, it feels like there's a positive sentiment, if you like, around the resources thematic. Because we all know the world is changing. We're moving to, whether we like it or not, the energy grid. It's moving. It's going to renewables. What is that going to take? It's going to take more copper. It's going to take more silver. And so I think that we're at the cusp of a resources super bull market, if you like. Not really being reflected, although, as Nomi just recently said when she was speaking, that the increase in gold this year, 24%, silver, 49%, and copper is up as well. So, and uranium, 60%. Oh
yeah. They've been certainly on a big run. Okay, so for investors, and I mean, Kerry, you and I were chatting a little bit before, younger audiences will typically go towards a NVIDIA stock or maybe, an AI stock that's giving bigger returns. We just had Rick Rule on stage talking that when it comes to mining, it could be up to 5 years, but the ROI is usually quite large, maybe a 10-bagger, things like that. Talk to me about investors in commodities. Have they come into this cycle, as you call it? We're just at the beginning, it seems.
I look at the cycle that we're in at the moment, and it is just the beginning, but it's been a brutal ride, especially in the small cap sector. You look at some of the small caps across, especially, and I focus a lot on the ASX, so the ASX listed companies. In the small cap sector, they have been smashed. And what happens, and especially, I'm known as that gold lady, so I look at the precious metals in particular. And if you look across all of them, what happens when you start at the start of a bull market, we'll start with obviously the producers. They'll start to get a bit of a run. Then it will go developers. And then finally you get into the explorers and that sort of small cap space. It hasn't filtered down to them just yet.
On the equity side, you mean? Yeah, on stock prices. I mean, it seems like there's a big disconnect with metal prices and stock prices on the equity. I'm curious, you mentioned the ASX, and the Australians have been coming in and they've been dominating mining for obviously a long, long time. They are one of the top majority producers in terms of mining. I'm curious, there's a lot of them coming to Canada and the US looking at our assets. So what's with that? What's been happening?
Well, I think Aussies are just always curious. I'm an Aussie. I'm very curious. I'm an investor with a curious mind. I think that as Australians, we're an island with 26, 28 million people. We have to go out and look for where those commodities, those opportunities might be. And I know that, for example, there's a number of Aussies that are looking in the Athabasca Basin for uranium, and a number of ASX listed companies over there. And Canada, for us as Australians, we love Canada as a jurisdiction, safe, a mining area that is positive, kind of like Australia. So I think there's a real connection between Canada and Australia, always has been.
Yeah, and we welcome you, of course, especially in the pink. I like this. I have a note. You said you're an investor with a curious mind first. And I'm curious when we talk about that, because investors are all around this place. And when you're looking to companies and you're doing due diligence, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of majors, there's a lot of producers out there in the junior side. There's a lot of fluff. How do you disseminate going through, the real companies, the positive companies, the ones that you put your, endorsement behind and really get behind? What's that due diligence look like for you?
Well, I think the first thing, I'm speaking to you at the Rural Investment Symposium. One of the most important things is don't take your information from social media. And I see people doing it all the time. Oh my gosh, I've just seen this stock. And I said, where'd you get the information from? Facebook. Really?
Great.
That's really interesting. So coming to somewhere like the Rule Symposium is fantastic. Why? First of all, we're going to get a look at macro, what's the macro outlook, because that does impact of where I as an investor are going to start to look. That's the first thing. Secondly, from investing in companies, if I don't know management, you can have the best asset in the world, but management is wrong, they can stuff it up. I've seen it time and time again. So I like to eyeball management. I want to ask them, do they have skin in the game? I want to ask them, what do you pay yourself? If you're a junior company and you're not even making any revenue right now, but you're going to pay yourself $500,000, that's a red flag for me.
Those G&A costs, they're so important. It almost seems like a lot of investors don't do enough due diligence to kind of go and look. So when you're looking at, the sector right now, we have a lot of successful juniors that maybe their stock prices aren't doing that well, but they are successful. Are we going into an M&A boom here? Are we going to see, how's that looking?
I think almost certainly we're seeing that happening in Australia. But the biggest challenge with an M&A boom, it needs to happen, but what have you got in the way? You got two MDs, both with egos, and neither of them want to give it up. Yeah. So how does that happen? Somebody has to step out of the way, and somebody has to remember that they're not there for themselves, they're there for the shareholders. But I do believe that not just in the interest of shareholders, but some of them just from a company standpoint, they have to actually look at M&A as a way to survive.
Yeah, especially the consolidation now. Do you think it's going to be sector? I mean, you and I just talked about how we have a green revolution happening no matter you like it or not. That's going to take copper, it's going to take silver, it's going to take different precious metals and minerals. So, has the audience or has the investors really understood that, okay, we're lagging behind now, but the potential in the next 5 to 10 years could be massive here?
Jeremy, I think you and I both know that we live in a world where the mobile phone and the internet is, everybody thinks that's, it's just immediate. And, I've said this before, I'll say it again. When you start to hear the taxi driver telling you what stocks to buy, run. But also, if you like a stock, and Rick Rule will speak about this quite often, if you like a stock and that stock price starts to fall back a little bit, if the fundamentals haven't changed, then stick with it. And I often say to people, you don't open a copper mine overnight. It's not like you turn the tap on and there's the copper. So have a look at the market supply and demand, and if it's out of kilter, look at where the opportunities are, but it's not going to happen overnight. It can take 10 years.
Do you think that the government almost has this conflicting standpoint? I mean, here we just talked about this revolution, and now, there's more red tape. So we need these minerals, we need this economy, but there's more red tape being imposed now than ever before. So talk to me about how we're going to make it all work.
Can we get rid of the government? Whoops, did I say that out loud?
Are you taking over?
No. I think government needs to understand. My issue at the moment is, you're absolutely right, and especially in Australia, we have more red tape now just to get simple things done. Australia was built off the back of agriculture and mining. I mean, have a look at Melbourne. We had the gold rush, beautiful buildings in Melbourne that were built off the back of that gold rush. We seem to have forgotten, especially in Australia, that mining does good stuff. We do good things. But boy, do they try and put so much red tape around it now. And this is why it takes a long time. And I think the only time that governments might start to wake up is when they see that they cannot fix, for example, the electricity grids, that they cannot build the solar farms, that they cannot keep the electricity turned on, and they'll suddenly start to wake up and go, right. For example, in Australia, we have some of the largest reserves of uranium, but we don't have nuclear energy. We banned it. Now, we have an election coming up, and the opposition are saying that they like nuclear energy, but the current government is saying we hate it. But I look at it and I say, again, you've got to educate people about the fact that nuclear energy is a clean source, zero carbon emissions, but people are still scared.
So who's going to win the race? And I know it's a loaded question.
Which race are we talking
I
about?
mean, I'll look at Canada, for instance. The Canadian government came in and they canceled a mineral deal a couple of weeks back that China wanted to purchase. They came in and said, no, we need to keep our minerals in Canada. I'm curious, if the Canadian government is looking at it. Are others? I mean, are they aware that there's other nations that are winning this race for green minerals, perhaps?
I think everybody is. I think there's a race for, we went global, everyone was friendly for a while, but I think now we've got a geopolitical issues that are happening all around and we all know that Australia and China are linked because we've got the resources that they need and then they send it back to us in the form of a finished product. It's the same around the world, but I think a lot of countries now are looking to secure supply. And for example, rare earths, you can't have China just come out commandeering that element of the market. It's got to have other sources. So we live in a very interesting time. And Jeremy, I don't know where it's leading, but I've just got, call it instinct. I think something's about to snap, and I don't know where, but just be aware.
But I gotta open that up, Kerry. I mean, what is your take? I mean, and we don't have to even talk about one of those events, but maybe your forecast over the next 6 months. I mean, we got U.S. elections around a lot of G20 nations. Yeah. What's happening?
Yeah, look, some of the signals are pointing to the fact that we cannot keep going down the road we've been going, which is let's print money like drunken sailors and keep spending it like drunken sailors. The balance sheet doesn't match anymore. But people have got too comfortable. When you get too comfortable, because the government just keeps saying, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about, print some more money, quick, let's just get us. You cannot keep kicking the can down the road. At some point, you've got to pay the piper. And I don't know, Jeremy, I could be wrong, but it feels like we're going to hit a pole pretty soon. So for me, as an investor, what am I doing? December last year, I actually sold a lot of stocks, some of it at a loss, and I sat in cash. Where am I now? I've come a little bit back in the market, but I haven't bought Nvidia.
Interesting, yeah.
I'm a big believer in real assets, and by that I mean, for me, gold, silver, property. So for me, it's all about there's a movement, hard assets, as we devalue currencies.
And are you buying the dip on the mining equities right now too? You starting to enter? Is it time to enter back into the market?
In certain commodities, yes. And for me, it is mainly resources. But I'm also looking at some of the gas plays as well, the oil and gas.
Yeah, interesting. Which is not going away anytime soon either. Okay, so before we let you go, because I know your time is valuable here, what are you looking for at this event? When you go home to beautiful Australia, hopefully wearing that gorgeous suit, are you thinking, okay, I'm an investor in 10 more juniors? Are you looking for longer term ROI?
Longer term, okay. Yeah. I think in this market, you've got to look longer term. You've got to have a set and forget. There's a couple of Australian companies here that I really like the look of that have been beaten to death. And so it's my chance while I'm here to go and talk to them and say, I often say to people, if you don't know what to ask, say, talk to me like a 5-year-old. And what are you going to do with my money? Because they're the custodians of my money. It's my wealth. Why should I give you my hard-earned dollars?
Sometimes it's so difficult with ASX. And some of these junior too, because they're so, they got 3 million shares outstanding. Or sorry, 3 million, they're
300 million.
300 million.
But that's normal for, it's funny.
I wish they had 3 million outstanding. We'd be a lot,
I think the smallest is about 200 million.
But I mean, the cost of capital has been so expensive in the past few years. That was the only thing to do.
But raising capital has been very, very tough. I was talking to a biotech company recently, and they had to do a deeply discounted capital raise just to get it away. So I look at things like that and I go, wow, the right companies at the right time. You're never going to pick the bottom of the market, and you're never going to pick the top of the market.
Well said. And keep those stocks for longer than you typically do.
Especially in this market. It will take time.
All right. I appreciate your time. Of course, Kerry Stevenson joining us from the Rick Rule Symposium here in Boca Raton. Now, of course, we'll have lots of more coverage coming up this week. Join us for more experts, more insights. I'm Jeremy Szafron. For all of us at Kitco News, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.
Kitco News special coverage of the Rule Symposium, Natural Resource Investing, is brought to you by G Mining Ventures.